Welcome back to Pastimes episode 6. We are finally back to discuss second half of the Expanse season 3, joined once again with my friend Josh. And I'm hoping just to hop right into this one since it's a lot's going on right now. A lot of new things are introduced. My understanding is the start of a new book happens at this point in the season. It really does feel like a new season. Not a big time jump, but there is a time jump. So before we get too far into it, I just want to get your reaction to when I just say The Ring. When you think of The Ring, because that threw me for a loop when that happened. I was like, okay, what is going on? So what were your thoughts, Josh, on The Ring when that was first introduced?
Man, that blew my mind. That was crazy. So we left off on the last episode, our last discussion, talking about, the squid brain looking thing taken off of Venus. And that by itself was like, oh, what's going to happen? But turning into a ring was not something I expected. But immediately when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is going to be some sort of like portal system, like that's kind of where my brain went right away, where, okay, is this going to like bring something to the solar system here, or how is this going to work? So immediately my mind went to portal.
I think mine did as well. And I think that was probably pretty intentional. Like, what else could it be? It certainly to what you were saying, I certainly was like, okay, as soon as it was introduced, I was like, wait, so that the thing we saw leaving Venus at the end of the last episode is now this. So I kind of had to wrap my head around that for a second of like, okay, it had developed into something new. So this show continues to surprise me just in the sense of like, I never really know how far they are going to keep pushing it with some of the sci-fi, like realistic, but sci-fi elements of like the proto-molecule and like the proto-molecule monster. And then I was like, okay, is this actually a portal that's going to like go somewhere? So I was kind of like in that middle ground of like, how far are they going to push it? And of course they pushed it as we'll get there. So I certainly was very surprised, but also kind of in like this excited sense of, all right, well, I guess we're going there in terms of this potential move into even further down the unknown of the show.
Yeah, when it starts off, the show is pretty, pardon the pun, but kind of down to earth in terms of its sci-fi. It's really, right. The science makes sense. The technology makes sense. You have the proto-molecule, not really crazy when it comes to like big sci-fi ideas. And then, you start ramping things up quickly with Eros moving, and then the thing coming off of Venus, and then the hybrids, and now we have this giant construct out. Where is it? Like out beyond is it out by Jupiter? I forget where it is, but it's pretty far away in the solar system, like away from the sun. So where things get pretty crazy. And I would love to know. So when it was revealed that it was a gate, like I just want to know, like, future storylines, like what came to your head? What were you thinking? Where possibly might this show be going now?
Yeah, having anything like that, a gate, or at least at the time assuming it was some sort of portal or gate, I didn't have necessarily a pinpoint idea because the possibilities are endless at that point. It could go to a dimension, it could go to another solar system, it could go to, I don't know, some crazy thing that we've seen, in other shows as well, in terms of like the type of way that it could go. So I was leaning towards probably another dimension in regards to, just from what we've seen from the proto-molecule, it appeared to be some sort of either from a very distant galaxy that somehow got to where we needed to get to, or some alternate reality or portal or something like that. So that's cool. That's where I was leaning at the time, because it was kind of like, again, possibilities are endless. It could be, I don't know, anything. So I was very excited to see where that was going to go, just because, well, for one, we had that, and then as well as just seeing how everybody who's been at odds with each other, the inner planets.
We should mention Mars, right now, just to remind our viewers, because some people, haven't watched the previous ones. For new viewers, Aaron has not seen all of the show. So we're basically talking through what Aaron has seen, and nor has he read the books. So if you're picking up on keywords that he's saying right now, without getting into spoilers, we're just spitballing here.
Yeah, exactly. And Josh, you've seen all the show and you've read most of the books.
And I'm going to avoid confirming or denying anything. Yeah,
you've done a good job of that. You've done a good job in kind of leading me into these questions in terms of getting what I think. So was And I think the thing that was most interesting to me about it was just the fact that it was not necessarily unifying, and we'll talk about this in the later episodes, but everybody had started congregating around it, you know, with Mars and Earth and the belt all kind of having a presence around each other of like, what is this thing? You know, starting to have a little bit of communication with each other of like, you know, the scientists trying to figure it out. So that was a side I was excited for about as well, just because again, this episode starts with a time jump and people on the Rossi are in different areas with Bobby and Naomi specifically. So you're kind of just wrapping your head around like, okay, some time's passed, like things, there's not as much tension currently between these different areas, just trying to figure out what's going on with this ring. What is it? So I was like, okay, all right, I guess that's going to be the main plot line, is figuring out what this ring is and all that. And of course, that's the direction it goes.
I think about analogs to our world, you know, like there's all these branches of humanity out there all heading towards the same thing, trying to figure it out. You know, when new technology comes to humanity, that's kind of what happens. Everyone kind of races towards it. You know, the nuclear weapon, everyone's trying to figure that out. When somebody gets there first, you know, that gives them a huge advantage. So it's really cool to see everyone kind of basically arriving there at the same time, to show that we're at a point now in the story where everyone's on the same page. There's no more Jules Pierre Maus out there who know more than
Right.
the rest of it. There's no scientists who are aware of the protomolecule when other people don't. It really is this moment in humanity where everyone's on the same page. So scientists are there. I love the fact that Anna is there. You know, you have all these religious people there too,
Yeah.
because it's like,
Mhm.
who the knows what this is? This could
Right. Yeah.
be,
It could be, you know, celestial, or, you know, something. When there's anything that involves unknown other, it's even for non-religious people, it's pretty easy for them to be like, yeah, I mean, we don't know. It could be something, you
yeah.
know, in that essence of, you know, the unknown creator, spiritual, something like that.
Yeah. And I really love, because of that, this moment in the show, in the story, in the books, just this complete open mindedness that humanity seems to share right now.
Mhm.
Um, how long that lasts, you know, we'll see, of course, as we talk here, but just having so many possibilities, like you were talking about, like, where might the show be going? You know, what story is going to be told with the ring, and to have that represented with the characters too, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about Anna's character in regards of just, so it was interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about her more. Having a character who is obviously grounded in faith or belief, being pretty open about her, just like not understanding what's going on and being open to the fact that, like, yeah, I mean, not to say that she thought she could be wrong, but just like, yeah, this is unprecedented. Like, we don't know what's going on, and I'm fine with not knowing what's going on. So I thought that was an interesting, something I wouldn't have expected from the show per se, to like have that be a prominent character in the show.
Absolutely. Yep.
And you do bring up the three main sectors being on more um, even ground in terms of their relationship in regards to how they, I guess, look at each other. So part of that is the OPA becoming the main governing body of the belt, which is ultimately led by Dawes and Johnson, I believe, basically collectively.
Yeah. Power
Um,
dynamic there for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. And it was fun to see Dawes. I know we've talked about him being just loving that character and the actor who plays him. So when he came on screen, I was like, yeah, we get to see him. I wasn't sure how much we'd see him, obviously not much, but it was fun to see him again, just because it would have been kind of weird just to kind of throw him off to the side, because he's obviously a big um, face of the
He's a big
OPA in regards.
character. Yep.
Yeah,
You got to
exactly. So
enjoy him while he's here. Yep, for sure.
so yeah, it was just interesting to see finally some more unity within the belt, because they've very much been kind of the melting pot of the galaxy of all these different people and have their own culture, and have very much been seen and felt as the downtrodden of the other two, Mars and Earth, in terms of they're ultimately the ones that they lose regardless of who's in charge, essentially. So I thought it was good that we got that scene of whether it was a good decision or a bad decision to make the OPA the governing body. I thought it was cool to see that actually happening within the belt.
Yeah, viewed by some as a terrorist organization, as others by
Yeah,
others as a, you know, freedom fighter sort of thing.
right.
But it's an organized system, and that's what the belt needed, was, you know, some sort of organization to bring toward to the table with the other two systems, with Earth and Mars. So not maybe the best, most ideal thing to represent everybody, but I think
Right.
the OPA, you know, most people out in the belt uh have some similarity in terms of belief with the OPA. So definitely a good fit.
Right. Yeah, it certainly could be a case where some people don't feel comfortable being fully in on them, but they probably have like an overall sense of like, yeah, we get what they're trying to do. We don't necessarily agree with how they're
Mm.
doing it, kind of thing. So they probably do represent a good chunk of the belt, I would imagine. So looking at my notes, a question I do want to ask as the resident book reader was the whole plot with the documentary crew in the books. Like, was that an actual thing that happened?
Oh yeah, with Monica. Yeah, that was all there. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get to see more of them because it's a long journey out to the ring. I think it takes a couple months, I want to say. Because I know in the books that James has been seeing Miller for a couple months. I think that
Oh, okay.
starts when they start heading out there, if I remember correctly. So yeah, you get to kind of see the dynamic on the ship with them. uh Works pretty well in the show too,
Didn't James start seeing Miller once the ring was actually activated? Isn't that when it happened?
when it got activated. Yep,
Yeah. Okay.
when that slingshotter went through it.
Right.
Super
And
cool scene, by the way.
it is a great scene. I will touch on that in a minute because the reason I asked you about the documentary crew, because part of me was wondering as I was watching if that was actually something in the books, is it seemed like a way that the filmmakers were trying to do like a different way of shooting the show in like a non-direct way, at least from
Oh,
just like a
fun.
storytelling perspective. Cause you get the different weird like reality TV angles and stuff like that, which was fine. But in my head, I'm like, was this something that was actually in the books, or is this just the filmmakers or the creators of the show who are in charge of that being like, we just want to have another way to like show different areas of like the Ross Sea and like different angles and being able to like catch these different conversations that are happening that we normally wouldn't get to see, kind of thing. So that was why I was asking, because I was like, this is cool in the sense of like the way it's shot, but I wasn't sure if it was for the specifics of the show or if it was something that actually happened within the books. That was why I was asking about that.
Why not both? Like, if you have the
Yeah.
opportunity to do something like that with the show, that's cool. Like, and I love the set as always. I think I've mentioned this so many times, but the set of the Rossi is so cool. And so having those different angles to show, the details of the ship inside the ship, like it looks really, really cool. I really love the inside of that ship. So any angle that we get of it is really
Yeah.
cool.
No, I really liked it. I was just, yeah, it's cool that they were able to do that because of the book as opposed to the other way around. So that's why I asked, because I just wanted
Yep.
to,
Some
because
fun
in my head,
creative
yeah.
choices
So
made
I'm sure
there.
that was an exciting thing as the filmmakers to be like, oh, we get to mess with some different camera angles and things like that. So
And some world building too, like the
yeah,
technology that the recorder guy, the cameraman uses, because
yeah,
he's
he's blind, right?
blind, right? So
Mhm.
he's using all technology with cybernetic
Yeah,
controls, which is
love
really
that.
cool. So that indicates that's kind of nice actually, getting to Melba too, because once you see a character that has sort of these everyday practical cybernetic implants and stuff like that,
Yeah,
then with Melba, when you see what she can do with her uh bodily changes that she's had made to her
yeah.
body, then that's not quite as out of nowhere as it kind of comes across.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that it does help us as a viewer accept it more easily as opposed to being like, oh, so there's just random people who can just like power themselves up, as opposed to like,
Right.
oh, it's like it's probably started as more of like a practical solution of like people are deaf, people are blind, and we have this
Mhm.
technology to do that. And then of course that the next step is always like the weaponized version, I guess, of
Yeah,
being able
exactly.
to augment people's abilities. So that's a really good point, and that's probably part of the thinking into that, as well as introducing that character, and really like those characters as well
Yeah,
in terms of the
I
crew
gotta
is what I mean.
yeah, I gotta be honest with you, just because it just came to mind now. When I saw Melba do what she was doing, I thought there was protomolecule stuff at work there. I thought
Mm,
maybe because I
I
didn't
think I
know
did
that.
too.
Yeah, because it's not really clear how she activates her powers. Like in the books, she uses her tongue to like draw a circle on the roof of her mouth, and that activates the
Mm,
glands to have her get her little strength boost. And in recording it, she kind of moves, you can see that she's moving her jaw a little bit, so something's going on there. But to be honest with you, when I first saw her introduced and doing all that, I was like, okay, is she like, is there some sort of like protomolecule hybrid stuff at work here? What's going
yeah.
on? So that's what, when I first saw it, that's what came to my mind.
Yeah, I think when I first saw her triggering the abilities, I thought in my mind I thought she was doing the tooth thing where people would like kill themselves where they like bite
Yeah.
the tooth. So I thought she was maybe like ingesting some sort of like liquid or something because it's like I don't know
Hmm.
if there was like a crunch noise or something like that, but the the angle that you talked about with the books with circling of the tongue seems like that could be a liability like if you just like accidentally did it all of a sudden.
Yeah, right. You got to
So
be sure, very careful not to accidentally do it. Yeah.
right, you're just like eating lunch and activate your powers or something. But so yeah, that's interesting. No, I didn't have that background, so I certainly was very confused, or not confused, but interested to see if they were going to explain why she had those abilities. So yeah, that's a very good point. But yeah, documentary crew was certainly something I did not expect either, and the background of it being like helping them pay for the things they need for, like, you know, maintaining their ship, I thought was a kind of a funny angle of like the only reason we're doing this is because we need money, essentially.
Hmm. Well, with any piece of military equipment, all the cost is upkeep. So they have this really nice ship now, and super expensive to
Yeah,
maintain it.
and it kind of reminded me of a conversation we had back on your channel with like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where it's like this person who's like done a lot of things in the context of the world that are like here, like being a hero and like doing all these good things, and then it's like, does that person just like not get money for any of this or like
Right.
support? Because it's like the Rossi doing all these things. It's like,
Yeah, you
oh,
still
we
need to
have to
make money.
accept this contract for a documentary crew because we don't have money to maintain our Mars military ship. So I was like,
Right.
oh yeah, just kind of
Yeah,
shows the
because
humanity of it. Like we have bills to pay.
right, because before this, they were basically doing missions for Tycho Station, so they were getting refilled there. But it's kind of funny to see now that okay, we need a real job now. Coincidentally, it's going to work with the plot of the book because we're going to go where the plot is going, but it's still kind of a funny way of getting there.
So one of the next plot lines that we start seeing is the Nauvoo, which is now OPA controlled. Really like this plot as well, just in terms of some of the characters we get. So we have Drummer, who is in charge of it, which is awesome. Love her character. We have Naomi, who is rejoined the Belters per se. So we don't really know at that point, I guess, how that went in terms of her leaving the Rossi and how that played out. But I do want to go to one of my favorite characters, and a character that I wanted to ask you about is Ashford, who, when he was first introduced, I wasn't sure what to think because I was like, is this going to be like the stereotypical piratey second in command dude? Because, you know, he's got the, you know, the scars and the burns and like the voice. At first I was like, okay, this seems like he could be cool, but I'm not sure. But very quickly became one of my favorite characters just in terms of his I guess, morality and the way that he conducts himself and things like that, and his relationship with Drummer. But wanted just to get your reaction to him, and again, if you have any insight if that character exists within the books and how you feel about him in the show as opposed to how he's represented in the book. So yeah, well, how do you feel about Ashford? Because he's one of my favorite characters in the show so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that most people watching who have read the books also will agree with this, but Ashford is way, way better in the show than in the books. In
Okay.
the books, he's really there's not a lot of depth to him. He's not a very interesting character. Um, the show, adding some differences. I think in the books, I don't think he has a pirate background.
Hmm.
Um, he in the books, he's kind of, I don't know, he's short tempered, and he's not very, you can tell that things are not going to go well for him as you're reading the books and seeing like it's how he makes decisions and stuff, and you're like, okay, how is this character going to really royally screw things up? Whereas in the show, you have this really three-dimensional character. He's harsh, but also he clearly cares about his crew. He's
Yep.
his interactions with Drummer is the one who is like most different because she's like an amalgam of so many different characters in the show.
Okay.
Um, but Ashford, yeah, way better, way more interesting dynamic with that part of the story, with the Behemoth, um, and everything that happens there in the story. Way better this iteration of Ashford than in the book.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like you don't see that very often with shows in terms of like a character
Yeah.
being dramatically different, or at least from what you said, it sounds like, I'm guessing most people agree that he's much better in the show.
Yeah, let us know
than
down
in the
below if
book.
you disagree, but or if you agree. But I think most people definitely, I think, prefer the show version. And it's
Interesting.
an amazing actor. Like he does such a great job as a belter. Like, how can you
Right.
not love that actor?
That stood out to me right away. Like he was very believable. And there, because there's certain belters that are somewhat reoccurring that just seem like a meme, kind of
Yeah.
like they're a meme of what a belter is, or like what I'd imagine. And he just like he's very convincing. Like that when I see him, I'm like, yeah, that's a guy who's been through a lot and has dedicated his life to, being on ships and doing all these things. He's got this rugged side to him that's believable, and it's not like, yeah. So I absolutely agree. So he's just wanted to get your thoughts, and you had some good insight there, because I wouldn't have expected such a dramatic, I guess, difference between show Ashford and book Ashford.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences here with the Bahamut story arc in the second part of season 3. That's a lot different from the show. Like I said, Drummer is a different character. There's in the books, there's Michio Pa and Bull, I think are the characters' names.
I think I remember you
Um,
mentioning Bull, yeah.
yeah, and Drummer's taken on some of that role, especially with the mech suit that we'll get to in a little bit here. But overall, I think those changes were really good. And the changes with Naomi, like Naomi is away from the Rocinante for longer in the books. I think back in Ganymede is when she departs the
Okay.
crew. But I think those changes work really well because we get to see Naomi in her, natural environment. Her belter accent comes out, which is fun to see.
Yeah. At
Her
first I was a little confused.
hairstyle.
I was like, wait, did she like just did the actress just decide to have this? But it would make sense like once you're around
Well,
that again.
you and I are both from Minnesota, and we have to really work
Yeah.
really hard to like bury our accents. Otherwise,
Yeah, for
people will make
sure.
fun of
Yeah.
us really hard. So,
Yeah, you betcha.
like, that's kind of like how I view it, where we really have to like work on not drawing out our O's. And so I imagine Naomi doing the same thing, where she's like hiding how she really talks from her,
Right.
like making an
Well,
effort
yeah.
all the time.
And like I have parents who are from the South, and they anytime we visit and go back, I can hear their accent come back out a little bit. So
It comes out, yeah.
that's kind of how I see it, where I'm like, you don't that's not how you normally talk, but when
Whenever
they're
I'm up
around
in
it,
the
it is.
Iron Range, it comes out like basically north of the Twin Cities for people who are aware of the Midwest geography. That's when my Minnesota accent comes out for sure. So it's like Naomi. The closer
Yeah.
she gets to her own folk, the more that comes out.
Yeah. It's a great acting or directing choice, basically, that they would have her default back. And then I think when she gets back on the Rossi, she kind of defaults back to her, I don't want to say normal voice because I don't want to,
It's
say that,
interesting.
but
Yeah, and I love that too. I'm going to bring it up now because I'm not sure if I'll remember,
sure.
but when she starts to reflect on what home is for her, like she goes back to working on the Behemoth in the show, and because she thinks that's where she's supposed to be, that's her people, that's her home, and then seeing
Right.
that character arc with her where she realizes that the Rocinante is her home, like just how that was done in this season was so excellent, and I really really enjoyed that, and I think that's maybe another thing that the show did better than the books, but I could just be misremembering the books, but really loved that character arc for Naomi in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And we briefly talked about Melba a bit, but we'll just want to point out that she's introduced as somebody planting a bomb on a UNN ship. Ultimately blows up. We'll talk about that, and that's where we do see her abilities that we're not 100% sure how that's happening, and pretty gruesome scene. I was
Mm-hmm.
not I mean, there's been gruesome scenes in this show, but I was not expecting her to like fold a dude in half to put him in the underneath the area that she was at. So that caught me off guard a little bit, because it was like she kills the dude and then you're like, all right, how's she gonna get rid of this body? And then she like folds his body and you're like, oh, okay, that's pretty brutal. So she's willing to do that. So that kind of tells you, I guess, where she's at in terms of what she's willing to do, but was very caught off guard by that, just in terms of like how brutal that scene was.
Yeah, brutal indeed. You get the pathos right away, right? She's establishing this rapport with the character,
Mm-hmm.
and a fatherly figure, which is going to play in
Yeah.
later when we know more about her backstory with her actual father. But this character who's kind of taken her under his wing and is showing her the ropes and is aware, she's got some stuff going on, but he wants to be a good mentor and be there for her. And then
Yeah.
he just happens to be the wrong place, the wrong
Yeah.
time. And you see what kind of person that she is. She's very determined to see this plan through that she's orchestrated, which, gonna be honest, this part of the plot in the book was a little bit so. Like, I'm happy to see more of the Mao family, and I think Clarissa is an amazing character. But I don't know, like going about it in this way, like orchestrating the um that fake message from Holden, and well, we'll
Yeah,
get into it. We'll
we'll
get
get
into
into that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like you said, they certainly played into that because she was very clear she didn't want to kill the dude. I think she even like when he finds it, he's like, "Why did you have to look?" kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
very unfortunate because he was being very kind and very good to her, and trying not to be too intrusive. So it was just a sad scene.
Yeah.
Sad for obviously character development for her, but yeah, very unfortunate. And like you said, we'll talk into talk more once we get into her background of to why she might have some daddy issues. So
Exactly. To say the least.
to say the least is right. Yeah. So uh closing out this first episode though, and we briefly talked about it, is the Belter Slingshotter, which I really, really liked this. I just loved the introduction of that. The kind of just really short side story of him and like why he's doing what he's doing. I think it's really cool world building in regards to that there's this like subset of people who partake in this slingshotting of
Mm-hmm.
trying to break. I mean, we live in a world of video game speed runs and all these different things, people trying to break records and shave off of seconds off of different runs to be able to like break these times. So it's like it would make sense that this would exist within the world, but it was just really cool to see that in regards to these junkies who go after that. So I really loved that. And I also think it's hilarious that that's the thing that triggers the ring. Like they take the decision completely out of like the politics and like just like the wars that are going on. It was like, yeah, it was just some dude trying to impress a chick and he killed himself doing it, but it also activated the ring and we didn't have to
But
make
isn't
that
that so
decision.
much of human history there, right there, though? Like how many mistakes, not maybe mistakes, but how many critical moments of human history that have determined the fate of our species have been because of, a dude wanting to impress a girl or another guy, or, like it's so human that it's almost too perfect.
Yeah, and of course another brutal scene of him hitting the ring and then immediately getting just obliterated, and we get to see that. Now that again,
That was
it's
cool.
not new to the show, but it still caught me off guard a little bit, like, oh, okay, we're seeing the result of that. But again, I just found it absolutely hilarious that that was the thing that triggered the ring. Like it wasn't, they didn't shoot a missile at it, they didn't like try to
Yeah.
probe it. It was just like some dude who was just said screw it and I'm just gonna make a name for myself, and he did. Like he's probably
Mm-hmm.
gonna be living infamy, I imagine, within
Mm-hmm.
the system. But I just
He made
absolutely
it to
love
the
that as
history
like,
books.
yeah, I love that that was just like a little side thing we got to see, and would make sense that there would be this community of slingshotters who are trying to beat each other's records. So I think that's really cool.
I love it.
Yeah. But then the main thing we get is, so as soon, and I guess the I would say where the show again surprised me in which the direction it went was, as soon as the ring's triggered, we get to see Miller again, and James is the only one
Yeah.
who is seeing him. And I was like, I wasn't necessarily, I was like caught off guard, but I didn't really understand. I was like really interested to see how they were gonna explain it, if at all, and then like what the point of it was, because it did seem a bit odd. Because at least at first, there's a lot more gibberish going on with like what um, Miller is saying and all these things. So and again, not to keep asking you this question, but is that accurate to the books in terms of how or and when Holden starts seeing Miller, and
I
how that
think he
introduction
starts,
happens?
yeah, I think in the books, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here down below, but I think in the books the gate is activated um and like well before all the ships get out there. So like I think that might be the triggering moment that causes, the fleets to go out there to investigate. But I think it's the same moment that it's activated that uh Miller starts seeing, or sorry, that Holden starts seeing Miller.
Yeah,
But
makes sense.
that's months earlier. So like basically the entire trip out there, he's
Oh,
trying to hide this, that, he has this thing going on and he doesn't know if he's going crazy. And also crazy Holden is amazing. Steven Strait has, to be honest, the first few seasons, he's like a so-so actor. But it really sold me on Holden, once he starts going a little bit crazy, because then you kind of can start to see the range that Stephen Strait has, whereas Holden is a pretty straight shooter, straightforward, but now we get a more interesting character, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I thought that was fun as well, just because his character is so serious all the time. He's very like, I'm da 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 da, and like that's how he goes about his business. And then you get to see the crack a little bit, and we see it in the next few episodes of like his crew members being like, what is wrong with this kid? Like, what is happening? Like, oh, you're talking to Miller? Okay, man. Like, cool. Like,
Yeah.
so it was fun to see like his persona getting questioned, I suppose, because he's, as we see, he very clearly is concerned because he starts scanning himself like immediately after that to see if he's infected with the protomolecule. I think they said it was like 50 times or 30. It was like some
Yeah.
ridiculous amount of times he kept scanning over and over
Clearly
again.
obsessive, like trying to figure that out. But what I like is there is the precedent, about this sort of life after death, for at least viewers. I don't think any of the characters would have been aware of this, but when Miller finds Julie, we know that Julie has died. Like when we see
Mhm.
her, when they find her in that hotel room, she's dead. And then
Yep.
Miller finds her and she's alive. So there's a precedent here. It's not necessarily coming out of nowhere that something like this could happen, but uh, yeah, it surprised me. I was pleased because I really love the actor, Tom Jane, and I really
Yeah.
love Miller, of course. And so any additional episodes that we get from him is very, very welcome. And I think it's a really cool way of, because there's exposition here that needs to be translated. When you have an extinct species, spoiler alert, but we'll get into it in a little bit here. When you have this, dead civilization. That has no way of communicating with our main characters. This is, in my opinion, a really good, elegant solution to have a character we're familiar with, a character who's a detective, so it all works. Having that as a solution to deliver some of this narrative backstory is really cool.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like out of sync with what is going on in the show. Like it didn't feel cheap in any way. I felt like reintroducing Miller. Obviously, it's not like the literal Miller. We, pretty quickly in terms of how he's communicating and the things that he's saying, and figuring out that the protomolecule is essentially speaking through him. Whether that's because that's the only way they can, or they know that Miller is using Miller's, I guess, visage for whatever reason is gonna help get James to where they need him to be, kind of thing. So I thought it
Mm-hmm.
was just it was cool to see like, okay, like how are they going to try to manipulate
Yeah, that's a great question
James?
though.
Yeah.
Like how Miller is this, phantom? Like how real is this character? Like, and then you get into other things too with in terms of identity and consciousness and stuff, of course, too. But yeah, really, really fascinating in my opinion.
Yeah, and just the way that Miller is speaking about him, well, himself and Holden being these tools, and you know, you know, tools to get to where they need to be, like using that type of language, and then James being like trying to figure out what that means is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a lot of questions are coming up at that point. And um again, just another situation where I was just like, okay, was not expecting this to be where the show was going in terms of the ring. And then this like I think you used a good word, Phantom Miller showing up, because I had no idea where that was going to go in regards to the show. So we get to witness that. And looking at my notes here, one of the things that we get to see, which isn't too surprising with the camera crew, is we get to see some sabotage of the Rossi with the blind cameraman, manipulating or adding the whatever it was to the circuit board. We don't know what it's going to be at the time. And I do want to say a side note on that guy. I loved his character, how he just hit on everybody,
Yeah, why not?
especially Amos, who was like,
Yeah.
didn't shut him down, but was just like, yeah,
Well, Amos was the center of attention there for sure. Like I
yeah,
think
he
both
was.
both of the the film crew there were quite interested in Amos, and then of course Amos's classic line of not you know doing something where he eats.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, pretty great.
I just love that side. I just liked that interaction because it's like just knowing Amos, like how uncomfortable he probably was. It was just kind of a great. I just really liked that moment of them interacting, and you're like, there was like a split second where you're like, is something going to happen? And then he shuts it
Maybe
down.
though.
Yeah. He like didn't like immediately like back away. So I just thought that was funny, but brings it up to move the conversation to say that we get to see something. We know something's going to happen with um, the circuit board, and we do. I think it's in this episode actually we get to see the UNN ship ultimately does get blown up by the bomb that Melba
Mhm.
planted, and then another crazy thing happens. We see a transmitted Holden message talking about how he was responsible for blowing this up, and he's the person behind all of this. And I think we briefly talked about it last episode of just like how terrifying it is that there's technology within this world
Yeah, we did
to
talk about
do
that a
these
bit.
deep
Yep.
fakes, because we're like slowly getting into that world now with deep fakes getting more realistic, and they're still not quite there, I don't think, but like we're not terribly far, so it's like not out of the realm of possibility where there's space travel and all the stuff that's happening. So it's like this can't be the first case in which this has happened. And if I remember correctly, was the circuit that the camera guy switched out just to have it so that it looked like the transmission was happening from their ship, so that
Yeah, I
they
think
could
so,
trigger
because it
that. Yeah.
completely hijacked all of their communications because they were not able to communicate out. Could they receive? I don't remember if they could receive, but they definitely couldn't transmit any messages
Yeah.
themselves. So I don't know if it was a relay that, or if it was just a pre-programmed set of instructions to uh, for communications. But either way, yeah, that made them lose their ability to correct everybody and say, no, no, this was actually not us.
Right. Which, based off the message, it'd be understandable why it'd be hard to believe that it wasn't, if it's literally looking like the transmission's coming from the ship, and it obviously looks like James. And at least this season, I'm guessing they don't touch on it. They don't really say how that happened, or like how they were able to make that message. Um, from what I can remember, I don't remember them like
Yeah, I
giving
don't
a
I don't know
specific
if they
reason.
go
It just
into
kind of
that.
is brushed over,
Yeah.
like, yeah, we just made this fake transmission, and that was it.
Yeah, I know in the books when we're, seeing Melba, she's talking to all these underworld people, paying vast sums of money for all of these things. And so that's setting the foundation. We don't know in the books right away what she's going to do with this, but that all comes together. But you get to at least see that process of her. Uh, I think there's a scene where she interacts with, I don't know if it's directly or if it's like some third party with regards to the software that's being installed. But
Right.
yeah, I don't think in the show though. I don't think they really go into that with how that was acquired and how that all worked.
Right. So yeah. No, I'm not. I don't think they did, which is fine. I'm like not too I'm not too upset about the fact we didn't get a specific reason or like how that technology works or anything like that. But obviously, very quickly dissolves into some chaos in terms of, well, we're not associated with James. Like this, we're not, and I believe pretty quickly happening. And I don't. Yeah, the way you're pronouncing it, so it isn't Behemoth. It's pronounced something else.
I, what did I say? It should be Behemoth.
I think yours Bahamut or something like that was what you were
Jeez,
saying earlier.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, which
but
is fine. I just didn't know if I was. I don't remember if I was saying it wrong or not.
it's
But
got to be Behemoth, right?
yeah,
Behemoth.
that's how it was spelled, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I'll say Behemoth for the lack of better terms. Made a pretty quick decision to fire on them, to be like, this will just show that we're not involved. Like we don't want to be associated
Mhm.
with James, because obviously Naomi was on the ship, so they didn't want
Yeah.
other people to think that they were associated with him in terms of this attempted start of a war with a UNN ship getting blown up, and then
I
Jim's.
love that scene so much. So many political things, so many
Yeah,
interpersonal things, having Ashford, Drummer, Naomi. Yeah, that was a great scene. And it
yeah,
was it was the correct decision. Like you can't argue with it. Like that was absolutely the right thing for them to do given the situation. But you also know Naomi, yeah, it was great. I love it.
yeah, and there's no reason for Ashford and Drummer to think that that was fake, and like
Hmm.
Naomi obviously is defending him, which is a cool part for her to be like, yeah, there's no way this is real, because James would never do anything like this, and she
Hmm.
pleads her case. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
if they
I
don't
agree it was the right
fire,
decision for the belt. Like they have no reason to think that that's not real, and they need a
mhm.
they're a newly recognized governing body. They want to make sure pretty clear that they're not involved with that.
Yep. Yep.
So
Really good situation.
yeah, so that leads to the Rossi heading towards the ring and
Yeah,
having to out.
doors and corners and that little riddle of Holden trying to figure that out. You gotta go slowly into the room. You gotta check
Yeah.
Check the
Yeah, like
doors and
listening to
corners.
the proto-molecule a bit and like trying to convince them like, no, actually to not get hit by the missile, we need to slow down
Hmm.
and all this stuff, and kind of working through that insanity of, if somebody was telling you that, you'd be like, dude,
Yeah.
you're absolutely insane.
Yeah, poor Alex.
Right. He's just like, yeah, I mean, I've flown ships for a long time. I don't think this is how this works.
That great moment where Alex has to turn to Amos and get the okay from Amos, and Amos is like the least mentally stable person on the crew, you know. So
That's a good point.
yeah, it was great.
So that ends that. I think that that's the end of the episode, where that, in terms of, they wake up to obviously not being blown up by the missile, and we find that the ring is stopping the missile with, I think it's like the purple outline. So that's kind of our first indication of, I guess, the potential power of the ring to be able to stop
Yeah,
missiles. And
the
we'll talk
first
about it.
time being in the ring space. Yeah, and so you get
Correct.
that
Yeah,
really
within.
trippy perspective of seeing, because in order to slow down, the Rossi had to flip, and so you see the burn as it's heading towards the ring. But then, yeah, that whole scene with that perspective where I think it's starting from the top of the Rossi and then looking down and then back up at the missile, like up towards the gate. But there's no sense of up or down, because you're in space here, and then you have the
Yeah.
weirdness of the ring space. Really trippy. I love it.
Were they did they enter the ring at that point? I don't remember if they had actually
Yeah,
literally entered, and it was just
yeah,
a
they
missile
were.
that was outside of it.
No, they were like just inside the ring, both the
Okay, I couldn't
missile
remember
and
because I know people could see it from the other ships.
Mhm.
I just didn't know if they. I couldn't remember if they literally passed the barrier into the
Yeah,
ring.
yeah. That's what the ring did, because once it's inside that space now the protomolecule civilization technology starts to come into effect.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So yeah, I did like that, like you said, the perspective a lot. I think we get a lot of really cool shots of like outside of the ring and inside of the ring and what they're seeing, and them being like extremely confused as to what's going on because they think they should be dead, and obviously seeing a missile that's still traveling at the same speed it was but not moving has to be an extremely trippy experience.
For sure. And another difference between the books and the show is, I, it works in the show really well having that blue kind of glow for the ring space so that you can tell, where you are. In the books,
Yeah,
that's more like just, void space, like this black
gotcha.
void space. So works way better this way.
Yeah,
And
it
that
makes sense
purple
they would
energy,
need.
to show that,
Yeah,
there's some like almost friction that's slowing things down.
yeah, it makes sense that they would need to include some sort of visual cue that there's like some, like you said, some sort of resistance or change in the space and which
Mhm.
they're in. So I really like that too. It just looked really
It
cool.
looks cool. Yeah.
I was looking ahead of my notes, and another kind of funny situation I did kind of laugh at was, once we find out that they find out that the camera guy was the one who had sabotaged the ship, and didn't know who it was that had paid him to do it, kind of thing. But I love that they immediately just kick him out. Like for some reason they're just like, yeah, you have to leave now, and they're like, wait, what? They're like, yeah, put suits on. I think it was Amos who forced it.
Amos is choosing to do these things, and it's
Yeah,
like,
he's just like,
well,
yeah, you guys are gone.
probably a better way of doing this. This
Yeah.
might backfire, like what if, yeah. But that's such an Amos thing to do.
Yeah, he literally locks him in and is like, "You have to go tell him that this is a lie. Like, get a suit on right now and go." Like, or
What
I'm opening this thing.
incentive do they have to like,
Exactly. That was what I was thinking. I was like, they're probably just gonna get off and be like, "Yeah, these guys are crazy. Like, they
yeah,
kicked us out of their ship. Like, there's no incentive whatsoever."
yeah, they could have died out there. Like what if there was a malfunction on their drift out towards another ship? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
So yeah, I can't imagine. It's like, yeah, they're not gonna be. They don't. Have, yeah, they have no reason to be. To paint you guys in a positive light, to have just thrown you out into the abyss essentially,
Yeah.
um, to do that. I just thought it was funny because I remember kind of laughing because, like you said, he just makes that decision and everyone's like, wait, what? Like, you can't do that. He's like, no, it's happening. They're just gone.
So typically Amos just goes by his gut, It's just, he has a sense of right and wrong, and in that moment that was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like I think we talked about it last episode too, how it's like all these characters, everything they do makes sense for their character, and like this, like how we view, if we looked at a characters like um their flaws and like the positives, like if these were D&D characters, they're acting exactly how we expect them to do. And, this is very much like a chaotic good situation, I guess. Of like,
Yeah,
I don't know
more
if good is a word,
chaotic.
but yeah,
Just pure.
chaos. We'll just say chaotic because it was very much like, but again, like him doing that was not, I wasn't like, oh, this character would never do that. It was like, yeah, Amos just does things sometimes, whether it's
Yep.
good or bad. And
These guys hurt his family, and now there's going to be consequences.
right, yeah, yeah, exactly. They're just gonna have to deal with the consequences, whether or not it was the right thing to do. But I had to bring that up because I just laughed pretty hard at that because it was just like, yep, see ya, and then you just see them get out and they're just like walking along. So
Yeah. Yep. And we also get in this episode the interesting choices that are made with Drummer,
mhm,
allowing Naomi, talking to Naomi there, the whole power dynamic on the
mm,
what would you call that? The main part of the behemoth, the control area. What do you call that?
control bay or yeah,
Yeah, wherever the the front desk of the
command center.
behemoth, the command center. There we go. There's probably the more technical term. But watching that unfold this whole season was great. We're going to see that in the next episode here, how that kind of culminates with Drummer and Ashford and sort of the dilemma they face. Is that next episode, or we'll get to it in a bit here with when they're pinned down. But Drummer having to make decisions, not just for her friends, but for, she's a representative character now.
Yeah,
And yeah, just talking to Naomi. And then in this situation, I think it made sense letting Naomi go. Made sense because Naomi is
yeah,
a skilled engineer, skilled technician. She can figure out what's going on. So it's absolutely, I think, the right thing to do in terms of, cooling things down and figuring out what's going on. But, it's also her friend. And so it's the right thing to do there too.
yeah. And I believe part of that is them, like you said, Drummer making the decision to enter the ring. And so I guess it would the Behemoth was the first ship to enter after the Rossi, correct? In terms of
I think so.
entering
Yeah. I think it went in right away. Yeah.
because I believe Naomi leaves like right after that decision or right before, one of the two. But yeah, so again, yeah, we'll continue to talk about it throughout, but a lot of great um moments without the show between Drummer and Ashford and Naomi in regards to, like you said, power struggle. I think is a good word because you
Mm-hmm.
kind of wonder, or especially early on, what Ashford's end game is. If he's ultimately like, does he want power? In terms of if he's a good guy or a bad guy, I say in quotes. So you don't really know what his intentions are. So you kind of glean a little bit throughout some of these interactions of whether or not you think he's ultimately gunning for Drummer's job. That's a hard thing to say.
Well, it
Um,
doesn't help that he has that little piece of cake. I want to use a different word, but now that's giving it a different context. So it's a word synonymous with crap. So the little crap,
yeah,
Diogo
kind of his
is
little
also like his
henchman.
little henchman. So that kind of
I hate
gives,
Diago so much.
yeah, I know he's not. So having that stain right next to Ashford, you wonder about his motivations and where this all is going to unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. So um this next, so we hinted at this plot line earlier, but everything with Melba, we get a really good flashback of her, um especially in the sense that we get the context that she's Mao's daughter, which I was not expecting any more of that backstory in terms of Mao. So we get a great backstory between Mao and Julie and her, and just their interaction and what their family dynamic was. And not too surprising to find out that Mao was not necessarily the greatest father in terms of how he treated his daughters, and very much put Julie up on a pedestal, and
Um,
very much had a daughter who wanted his approval and was willing to do everything she possibly could, and he still put her down. Was very interested to see that because I just didn't really understand what his intentions were with that. Like, if you really thought that that was like a good way to parent, or like why he would say the things that he would say to her. Like, he pretty much was like, yeah, you like, Julie's my favorite daughter is essentially what he said,
yeah.
kind of
Well,
thing. So that,
he's such a good example of a narcissist.
yeah, for sure.
So I think viewers who have been raised by narcissists probably can see some similarities in their own lives there, where uh, Mao, like you said, he doesn't really care about his daughters. He cares about how his daughters reflect on him.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting to see Julie making the decisions, out of rebellion, and then Clarissa making the decisions out of devotion, and
Yeah.
neither of those decisions being anywhere close to what Mao actually wants, which
Yeah.
is
You get the daughter who gets all the adoration and attention, who ultimately goes against him, and then the one who gets all of the negative side is the one who's still trying to gain approval by, doing what she thinks her father would approve of. So it's kind of a interesting dynamic of
yeah.
things, well,
And
especially in Mao's perspective, not going the way he would have expected. Like, why would the daughter I treat well do this and the one I don't do this, kind of thing.
right. Right. Melba slash Clarissa's motivations are one thing. I'm not a super big fan of that with the show. Like, I think it's a little bit weak where, Mao is in prison at this point, and her plan is to blame Holden by doing all these like really
Yeah.
complicated decisions, in order to, like, yeah, I don't know. It's very a convoluted scheme. Oh, here, let's say hi to my kitty.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Views spiked right there, cat in frame. I will agree. I did feel her motivation being a bit weak, like her hatred of James. James, the reason my terrible father is in prison, didn't necessarily seem like the strongest motivation to try to go and murder him. In
Yeah,
terms of, like, she
and
didn't seem to
murder
like
other
have a
people too.
yeah, well, yeah, she murders a lot of people in her wake to get there. So yeah, I agree. I definitely had that feeling of like, okay, like
But
your
she
hatred,
is, yeah, she's a little bit of a monster, I guess, in that way, where she doesn't really have a sense of empathy.
much
So
like her father.
yeah, like her father, she kind of inherited that. So I guess it works, it makes sense, but it's, so many convenient things with the season, so this was just an
Yeah,
additional one to move the plot forward that I thought was like, yeah, okay, it's fine. But I feel
yeah,
like there's probably a better way of including this character without maybe this plot point. But
yeah. I mean, I guess she's ultimately used for sending out the fake transmission and everything. But I agree, it could have been better. But yeah, there's certainly her motivation could have been more ironclad, I suppose, and why she goes about the things that she does. But
yeah.
so circling back to the Miller plot line, so another really probably one of my favorite top moments in this season of Holden making the trek out into the ring in terms of finally getting to see more of it. I guess that's where my excitement came from, is where Miller convinces like, hey, you need to go out and investigate, because I think at this point they had talked about there being that structure in the middle, maybe.
Yeah.
In the center of I guess it's basically a giant circle is what they're
Sphere. Yeah.
sphere encapsulated in, and there's some sort of structure in the middle, circular structure that's emitting something, and Miller's convinces James to go out there by himself, and you're like, okay, this will be interesting to, I guess,
Just a
see how
space
this is
jump.
gonna, yeah, space
Yeah.
jump, and you get to see floating Miller for the first time, kind of
Yeah,
going
I think
along
at
with
that
him.
point we know that that structure, that spherical structure in the center of the ring space, is drawing all the objects into it,
Yep.
and all those objects are orbiting around it. So yeah, jumping out into space, definitely a great decision, and
Yeah, by
just
yourself,
yeah.
unknown dimension.
Yeah, why not just jump? But very classic James Holden thing to do.
Yeah, he's doing what his character would do, I guess, in that situation, especially being encouraged by this Phantom Miller, which is a weird sentence to say out loud.
Mhm.
But I do want to call this out too with the Martian crew, more so because it's a recent thing. But we get Bobby and the crew who are ultimately follow Miller, or at least track him down. Is the main commander of the Martians in that episode was the actor who played Shang-Chi in the
Yes.
Shang-Chi movie. Because
Simu
I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks after that movie had come out when I had watched this
Oh,
episode.
that's
So
great timing.
I like saw him and I was like, that guy looks really familiar. And it was like 30 seconds later, I was like, that has to be the same, because I had never really seen him in anything before. And I knew this was obviously a few years back. So to see him, and I was like, oh, I wonder if he's going to be in the show more or something like that. But we'll talk about
And
it in a second. But very quickly
he's
is
come
not in the show.
yeah, he's come a long way since his stock photo days.
Yep, stock photo. His one episode arc in The Expanse as a Martian commander. But yeah, I was just wanted to bring that up because it kind of caught me off guard a little bit because it was very his that actor was very fresh in my mind in regards to
Yeah, I
he's
think when I
obviously
was
going to be.
rewatching this, I think it was either right before I watched Shang-Chi or maybe right after. So I caught that too because I had read somewhere, or maybe I was looking for it through his IMDb, and I saw that he was in The Expanse. I'm like, I do not remember him being in The Expanse. So
Yeah,
it was cool to go back and see. Oh yeah, there he is.
yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to call that out because I thought it was again another kind of fun moment to see him, especially seeing how far he's come. Obviously, now that he's going to be massive movie star, or is a
Mhm.
massive movie star now, based off of Shang-Chi, which is a great movie. But this whole situation of him going towards the structure, this is the type of stuff I really like about the show. Anytime that in any sort of like video game as well, where you're exploring like finding like this unknown structure and going inside and exploring. That's the type of stuff I live for. So I was like very much on the edge of my seat of like, okay, we're getting closer. Then it like opens up, like this thing opens up for him to enter, and you're like, okay, like what type of civilization are we dealing with? Because we have this idea that this is some sort of ancient technology. And again, the show going down this direction of how far are they going to push the sci-fi side of in terms of like ancient technology that's dormant and coming alive and causing people to go towards it. So what were you thinking at this time? I mean, I think you had maybe read the books at this point, but like what were you thinking as he's entering this structure and going towards it? Like, are you thinking he's going to find an empty, is it going to be empty? Is there going to be anything in there in regards to this alien race potentially? Like, was there anything going through your mind you thought that we were going to see at that moment?
Yeah, I don't think I was. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I was caught up in the books at this point in the show, if I remember correctly. Or if I was basically only caught up and didn't know what was coming after that. So I'm trying to go back in my memory and sort through, the memories I have of the show afterwards, how things unfold, and that moment. But I think where my head was at, where I was expecting or hoping that we would see a lot of this ancient civilization, either through maybe some sort of like hologram, or we would have like a flashback sort of thing. And I was really hoping to see as much of that, of where the proto molecule came from, as
Yeah.
possible. Maybe even to see what those life forms looked like. That would have been cool. That's kind of where my head was at.
Yeah.
Um, but just that point in the story is just so cool because it's really, you have no idea what's going to happen. You're in this space that doesn't make any sense, doesn't really seem to be following, traditional rules of thermodynamics, or if it is, it's like in complete control of everything in that
Right.
space. So you're not sure what this, it's really disorienting. And then you have, in the midst of this completely unrecognizable space, you also have this piece of technology that is not working like how you think it would be working, and it's just so not human in its design, which you got to give hats off to the writers for accomplishing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just had no idea where this was going to go.
And Holden touching the circuit, or at least putting his hand in, and where he sees the vision and all that, is that what triggers the deceleration of all the other ships? Or did, because in my notes I have it
um
happening like around that time, but I don't remember if that was
I
the
think it's
trigger.
no, I think it's the gun shooting the grenade. I think it's the velocity of the grenade that's fired that becomes the new speed limit. So
Oh, you're talking about the grenade in when they're in the structure when the Mars.
yeah, I think that's what triggers
So I
the.
think it was the Shang-Chi actor who does that, and he gets
Yes, I think
molded
that's what
into the floor.
happens. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what causes that speed limit to change, because now you have, okay, that amount of velocity acceleration is unacceptable. So everything below that is now acceptable. I think it's like 35 meters per second or something that it
Yeah.
changes to. Um, so however fast that grenade was fired out of the gun, I think is the new speed limit.
Gotcha. I couldn't remember the exact trigger, if it was that or him touching the circuit that caused it, but mostly bring that up just because that's a pretty major turning point in the season in regards to the deacceleration of all, the UN the UNN, Mars, and Belters all having these mass casualties of all these ships stopping. I don't know if complete stop, if it was a complete stop or not, but basically, as you can imagine, if you're for how fast ships are going and to stop at an extremely fast pace, a lot of people are going to be injured. And I
Yeah.
also,
Well,
yeah, and I also the part of the story with that kind of brings things along that kudos to the writers of the books and the show of like this idea of like the way that the gravity works and the way that with internal bleeding, like without gravity, like there's no
mhm.
way for any sort of medical assistance to happen. Like I didn't really expect them to go that direction in regards to how they were going to go about that. But I just thought it was a cool thing. Like I never would have thought that, but it makes complete sense that that's how that would work in terms of the human body going through that sort of trauma and needing gravity for the internal bleeding to stop. So just wanted to call
It's
that out
my
because I just thought it was
it's my
like,
favorite
oh, it
part
makes a
about
lot
the
of sense.
show. The physics and just the accuracy of the physics, acceleration causing gravity on the ships, and the reason why the ships are built the way they are, kind of like skyscrapers with level on top of level. So because it makes gravity as you're accelerating, and then the centrifugal gravity that we get to in a little bit here. But it's all, yeah, really cool to like look at the world through our current understanding of physics and project that forward and see what kind of stories you could have with that.
Yeah, and I know we get early on in this specific episode of Naomi ultimately getting to the Rossi. Of course, she's injured as well, but they're conveniently, I don't say that in like a sarcastic way, but conveniently able to help get Amos and Alex back on their feet in regards to they're obviously pretty messed up. And again, another really great scene, mostly just from an actress perspective, but the Ashford and Drummer interactions we get where they're stuck between the giant equipment. I don't really remember
Yeah, like
exactly what
almost
they
like a
were.
bulldozer type thing.
Yeah,
Like
I was, yeah, again, one of those situations where I never would have thought that would have been something that happened, but we get some really great conversation back and forth between Ashford and Drummer in terms of really getting to understand the type of leaders that they are
mhm.
in regards to um, what they're willing to do for their ship and for what they believe the belt is. So I just really liked that side of things because, again, I feel like at that point we're maybe still not 100% sure about Ashford in regards to his intentions. Like, is he going to try to manipulate the situation and kill Drummer and then try to take over the ship kind of thing? So I just really liked that scene. Obviously, it's not
Yeah.
great in the sense that they're injured, but I just think
I,
having those two characters stuck basically in a room together and having to figure things out was awesome.
and it was kind of cool, like how close they came to almost solving it, like with that robotic arm, like
Oh
that
yeah,
was
yeah.
cool, like showing them work together and being able to accomplish things if they're working together. Even if it doesn't turn out the way they wanted, they can at least still accomplish what they're trying to do. But I was really concerned. I remember watching that, and at that point in the show, I was like, I really like both these characters, and
Yeah.
I kind of think one of them might die right now.
Yep.
And I don't want either of them to die. Especially, yeah. So that must have, I don't think I was caught up in the books then, because I remember thinking that, like, being really concerned that Drummer was going to die at that point. Because that kind of seemed how it was going. So
Hmm.
really interesting situation to see what's going on in Ashford's mind. Like I said, he's more of a three-dimensional character because of stuff like that, where you can see that he's not just, this rough exterior, that he's even singing at one point too, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly,
he
like,
is. Yep.
really showing what type of character he is. So it was cool. And then of course it sets up for Drummer to have her mech legs later in the show.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. I will say I was in the same boat as you in regards to thinking that one of them was going to die and being not happy about that because I just like both of those characters a lot. And I was like, well, we're just getting to know Ashford, and he seems like he's going to be a cool character. And then everybody loves Drummer, and she's a great character. And I would hate for her to go like this.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, it would have been sacrificial or whatever, but we do ultimately, like you said, she gets her bionic legs, which is a bit weird. I'll
A bit
admit,
weird.
like I was like, okay, that's not where I was expecting this to go, but I guess the technology exists for that. But that ends, of course, with Ashford ultimately being the one that gets out, Drummer getting crushed a little bit more, her spine, and that leads to really interesting situation where we find out that the Nauvoo, and I don't remember, well, I guess not the Nauvoo anymore, but the Behemoth having the technology to turn on its drum to, simulate gravity. I don't remember if that was something that was talked about earlier
I
in the
think that was,
show that we knew
yeah,
it had that ability.
I think that was mentioned way back when Fred Johnson was showing it to them in the first place.
Oh, that's what I thought
Um,
might have been the case, but when I was watching, I was like, I
yeah,
wonder if they talked about this.
but I think if it was just such a brief, giveaway line. But yeah, because you have the farmland. I think in the original, I don't think they had that anymore when the OPA took it over. But I think when we first see it, we could see like the fields along the edge, and then there was supposed to be that center. Well, there still is that center of light, almost like a sun in the middle of the
Oh yeah.
ship. So I think it is mentioned earlier, but yeah, it's kind of a quick thing that you can easily forget about. And happens to be super convenient, though, that this ship that can do that particular thing that we need for this particular problem is here. So,
At the same, yeah, I agree with that, but at the same time, it does make sense in regards to the purpose of the ship being like this, the Mormon voyage into a new land kind of
mhm,
thing, that it would need that sort of technology.
yeah, for sure.
But again, still convenient, but um, a really, really great Ashford character development in regards to him, obviously ordering the drum to begin spinning so that they can get that gravity back and start having people recover. But what I really liked is that there was like no question in his mind that they should invite every other person on their ship in regards to Mars um, and Earth. And I say that in regards, I like, because there was like, to me, if from what I remember, he didn't really, he was obviously met with some opposition from people on the ship of like, why are we going to invite these people on our ship? But Ashford was just like, everybody's invited. Everybody can get here. Send your doctors, send your scientists. I just like that because again, I talk about him being my favorite character, and that was just a moment where I like, because like, oh yeah, like this guy just like, he's just a great leader, and he's willing, and he's a great leader because he's able to put aside, like his issues that he might have with these specific groups of people, and to say like, hey, we're all in this together. None of us really knows what's going on. We have this ability. We all know that everybody else is in the same situation. So like, come here, get here as fast as you can. And there's no, you know, we don't need anything in returns in regard to that. So I just really liked that because it could have been drawn out quite a bit in terms of like, please let us get on your ship, blah blah blah. It was just kind of
Yeah,
like, no, we're going to do
straight
that.
to
So
it.
how did you feel about that? Was that a surprise to you, or?
Yeah, well, I think he's a great political character too. Like, I think the right thing to do in that situation also happened to be the politically correct thing to do, not
Right.
PC, but the correct thing to do politically. Um, so it was a good decision as a leader. It showed, sure, he benefits from it. You're moving the center of power in the ring space now back to the behemoth. Everyone's relying on him. So there's that sense of you're owed, right? So there's that, but it's also people are dying and it's the right thing to do. So it happens to be politically expedient and also morally just.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So mostly brought that up just in terms of the continued progression of Ashford's character, and I just really
Yeah.
like his
And
selflessness
his
and
head, to add on to that real quick, his headspace too. He just had that situation with Drummer. He almost just died. So I don't think,
yeah, that's true.
I don't think his head is in the place where he's thinking, okay, the only thing I need to worry about is what is going to bring me the most power. Like, that is not where he's at. I think he's thinking, okay, how can we save as many lives as possible? I was just in this near death experience. My perspective on things is quite sharp right now. So I do think in that moment he is thinking, let's save as many lives as possible.
Yeah. But yeah, and he very easily could have just not allowed anybody. Yeah, he just like,
Mhm.
he very easily, and you would have been, I feel like as a viewer, I wouldn't have necessarily faulted him for that, just because he doesn't have a necessarily any incentive to be that way. But just a
Yeah,
really
with
great
how the
moment.
belt has been treated. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah, that was another great background of that. It wasn't like
Yeah, like if
the people
he's
who
the
are,
only, if
yeah.
the Belters are the only ones who make it out of there alive, who's going to tell the actual story about what happened?
Yeah.
So there was,
Yeah.
they're kind of in a locked room here, and nobody else is in there, so he could have gotten away with quite a bit for sure.
And to and looking at the kind of the next thing that happens towards the end of this episode, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I think we both probably agree on this, but some of the stuff with Clarissa being a bit weird, where we get the scene where she boards the Rossi towards the end of this episode looking for Holden, and then she gets stopped by Anna because Anna followed her. We didn't really talk about it much, but there's obviously some interactions between Anna and Clarissa
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
main UNN ship where they have some moments, I suppose, where Anna's trying to speak to her
Yeah, we
when she
skipped over
finds
a
out.
lot there with that
Yeah,
whole development with Anna and Clarissa, and was it Tippy? What was the other character's
I
name?
don't remember
Her
the one that dies. You
Anna's
mean?
friend, yeah, who happens to have known Clarissa. Um, yeah, we skipped over that a bit, but it does culminate here with both of them heading towards the Rocinante, which is funny because this whole time Anna has been a character who has not really wanted to cause harm, always trying to not cause harm. But when you think about the decisions that she's made, she's hurting her family back home by choosing to go in the ring and not talking to them first, not talking to her wife first. And
Right.
they have a kid, right? At least,
They
right?
do.
So she's choosing to do that. So she's causing emotional harm, but she has this whole thing about pacifism. And she quickly gets over that when she, hits Clarissa in the back of the head with a what was it, like a wrench or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it was just one of those, like, I liked the interactions they had earlier in the episodes, but I just feel like, again, that plot line is just kind of, it's a bit cliche in the sense of like person chases down person on ship and then somebody follows and then knocks them out. Like I feel like I've seen that in other
Mm-hmm.
shows or kind of thing. So I remember when it happened, I was kind of like,
Yeah, how did she
okay.
sneak on board? That's quite skillful to be able to like, she doesn't seem like someone who has a lot of experience out in space, but she was able to, I guess maybe there's some programming on the suit that can do some of that work for her, but still quite
Yeah.
impressive to have made that jump and then
Yeah, because I don't
negotiated
think we
getting on
see it.
board. Yeah, we
We just
don't.
see her boarding basically, so we have
Mm-hmm.
no idea how she actually got there, really.
Yeah, so
Yeah, just one of
whatever.
those things where like Anna gets on the ship and I'm like, okay, all right, so she followed her somehow and then knocks her out. Okay, just
Yeah,
felt like, yeah, kind of a bit like just like a little bit of a filler side story, but maybe other people don't feel that way, so let us know. But
for sure.
that's how I felt about it. And then the end of this episode, as we're getting to the last, I think 2 episodes after this, is we get Holden and Billy, because I think because the Martians,
Bobby.
I believe Bobby, yeah, not Billy, I don't know why I said Billy, Bobby, and the other Martians who survived take Holden aboard their ship, and Bobby and Holden are speaking, and he goes into his spiel about the vision that he sees, which of course I'd imagine
Would
is a
believe
pretty
that.
weird,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty weird thing for your buddy who you've been through a lot of situations with. Telling you this is probably a bit weird. So I'm not really sure how she was feeling in that situation, other than you do see. I think it speaks to who James is as a person. The fact that like he's gone throughout this part of the season, he's gone through all these insane situations and like is acting weird, saying crazy things about seeing like a dead person and like the proto molecule speaking to him. And then, but like people still support him though. But like
Mm-hmm.
Bobby doesn't like just dismiss him. She's
Yeah,
not
it would
like,
be easy to for sure, but
right. And I mean like the same with like Naomi as well. Like they're both like, I know this sounds really weird, but like James is a good guy, so we should like hear him out. Like is basically the
right.
theme,
And
which
with
is,
everything that they've been through, it's like, yeah, this may as well be true also.
yeah. Yeah. I say that and to say that I think that speaks to just like how much people like respect that he has among his,
Mhm.
his friends and then also his crew members. Just of like he's done so much for them and has showed his selflessness that they're willing to like let this like apparent psychotic break just go, because it's like, well, the dude's been through a lot, so I guess it makes sense he might see like a dead person and like
Yeah.
hear
Yeah,
all
but
these things.
yeah, they all know he's a man of integrity. He's a straight shooter. He hates, secrets and lying. And so
Yeah,
it wouldn't make sense. I mean, he's either in a full psychotic break, which is possible given everything he's been through, or he's telling the truth. And so
yeah,
I think for these characters to take the gamble and trust him, yeah, it makes sense with everything that they've been through with him.
yeah, yeah, and being that mostly, or that everybody in the show right now is going through a very traumatic event of we're in this alien dimension. Our ships are not following proper physics as we understand them. And this dude's, saying that he's speaking to the proto molecule. You could see why people would be a little more open to talking
Yeah,
to him. Like, we're just looking for a solution here. We're just trying to like get out of this situation. So at least we'll hear him
exactly.
out.
Yep.
Which ultimately culminates to, Ashford talking to him as well with, I believe that's after the fact where everybody gets on the behemoth. And I think really the only thing that they institute is that the OPA or the Belters don't allow them to have any of their guns or anything like that, which is a
Right.
little bit of resistance, but not much, but somewhat understandable. Like, you're coming on our ship.
Given the
So
situation, yeah, a lot
yeah,
of
I just remember that being
distrust.
like at least one scene where there was some back and forth of like, you're welcome here, but you can't have your guns. And then there being some hesitation. And of course, Diego's there being a prick or something
Right.
because he's a prick.
Yeah.
And nobody likes
But
him.
it sets up, they take the Martian heavy armor, those
They
suits.
do. They do that. Yeah, that is true. And we do get some new information at this point of the show about, Holden talking to Ashford. And I do like the scene a lot just because I like those actors together, Holden and Ashford, and him not being, at least in the situation, not being dismissive of Holden. And we get a little more background around the fact that this is the result of an alien race who created the ring, and that them no longer being around, and obviously opens up a lot of questions of like, well,
Hmm.
where'd they go? Like, that's
What
even more
happened to him?
ominous
Yeah.
if there's like this crazy powerful society or ancient race that existed that is no longer here and is
That's
caused.
terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh wow, that's not, getting warned. You're being warned basically by an alien race that's extremely powerful now, but is no longer seems to be existence, is not probably the greatest news you want to hear.
Yeah,
um
a civilization that has tamed space, creating this
yeah,
crazy,
that's good. Yeah.
crazy technology. And where'd they go?
Yep. Oh, that's fun. And I do have my notes. I put drummer builds new legs, so we hinted at
Yes.
that. We get at least for me, a very unexpected. I figured she'd be okay, but I wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily thinking their solution would be that she would have Darth Maul legs all of a sudden. In
yeah,
regards to, she can walk now because she's in pain and for a lot of it, but kind of like, oh, I guess the technology exists for her spine to be attached to this thing, and that's how she's gonna
yeah,
get around, I
yeah.
guess.
The doctor warns her that it can create some permanent damage if she gets up, but
Yeah,
I think it works for her character.
it
She wants to
does.
be
Yeah.
back on her feet, and that's a pretty desperate solution in order to get back on her feet.
And I believe her main motivation for that was to get to Holden.
Hmm.
Her and Naomi, I believe, are the two that go. Excuse me, are on their way to get to him too, so they can discuss that. So it
What a
makes sense that.
reunion. Naomi, like, you have to imagine what's going through her head through all this. Like, everything that's happened before going into the ring and now after, and then finally they're reunited here. And then, like, shortly after that, I think she overhear him talking to Miller, or maybe that's Clarissa who we see, who's
I think Naomi
like,
did see some of that. Well, we do. There
yeah,
is a scene where Naomi is like, because they're both down in the cells together, right?
yeah,
And she's
yeah.
just like watching him, and he's like whispering to himself, and
It's
she's like,
like,
"What the hell is
okay,
going
my boyfriend has lost his mind. That's great.
on?" So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a bit, the legs. I know we had hinted at it, but yeah, certainly again, just another thing I wasn't expecting to happen, but makes sense for Drummer's character that she would just be
Hmm.
like, I don't really care what the consequences are of me doing this right now, but I need to be able to get where I need to get. But
Yeah.
one of these things, I kind of reviewing my notes here, that I wanted just to talk about was, I do like the fact that we get a lot of interaction between the scientists, between the UNN, and I don't know if it was all three that were talking, but I know for sure in the UNN and the Behemoth have this conversation of trying to gain more data
Hmm.
on the structure. And I, at least in my mind, I'm a very analytical person, and I've had jobs in the past that have required me to have that mindset. So I really liked that, because where it's a scientist, they're like, this is what we know, but if we want to know, we need more data, so we need to do something to like poke this thing to,
Yeah.
to do it. So in my mind, I was like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that
Yeah.
that's their line of thinking of like,
We just got to set off a nuclear bomb in here.
we literally don't know, like everything that we understand as scientists about how the world works is not true where we're at in terms of how physics work. And they basically say that they're like, we don't know why this is
Yeah,
happening.
we got to get as many data points as possible to try to like even have a glimmer of what's going on here, like just a glimpse of what's going on.
Yeah. And what was your reaction to the idea of setting off a nuclear bomb by it?
Oh yeah, I was worried about that. I'm like, okay, we've seen this central station here in the ring, this, device, whatever it is, slow things down, like has complete control over how fast things go. I feel like setting off a bomb, like the physics of that is going to like completely annihilate everyone in here. Like I was very worried that that's going to create this cascading effect that would kill all of them, and they would be in this race against time to like try to get out of there before like the thing that they just did. Like, yeah, I was worried about it.
I mean, I guess it makes sense that they would think that the explosion wouldn't necessarily be as devastating as normal, just because if it's able to stop ships and stop bullets, like it can probably like contain,
Yeah,
an explosion. They're going off of an assumption like if we do this, at least we'll see like what the reaction is. And
yeah, and with what they have right now, like what choice do they have really? So it's
well, I
like,
think that was why too. They're like, we literally we're stuck here, or we need to do something to try to figure out what's going on. So it was definitely more so out of necessity than it was like making a dumb decision, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, they find out pretty quickly that the structure, the space that they're in, is not a fan of nuclear explosions going off. Right. They find out pretty quickly, which is understandable. And as you said a minute ago, there is this kind of race towards time as they see some sort of charging or some sort of retaliation is going to happen, with the implication that everything on the other side of the ring. And I don't know how they know this, but I believe it's Ashford. Well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think
like how they know that it's going to destroy the solar system.
Yeah, Ashford has talked to Holden, and Holden has shared that part of his vision where, like, they annihilated complete systems in order to stop whatever was killing their civilization.
Yep.
I think that's what's in Ashford's head. And like we just talked about, Ashford is in the mindset of saving as many lives as possible. So if he starts to think that this station is going to destroy, their solar system, their home, he's going to do whatever he can to stop that, even if that means killing everyone in the ring space. But it would save, the 20 billion people on the other side.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And hearing you say that it was the conversation with Holden where he gets the information of like the retaliation of this structure is destroying the solar system that it's connected to. So that makes a lot more sense. And yeah, a lot of stakes there, of course, in terms of going on there. So, and I'm trying to remember the specifics around. Was it at this point where Ashford, they have the conversation about shooting the laser as well?
Yeah, I think one of the scientists has brought that up as a possibility, and Ashford selects that as his main, his option A to just destroy the ring.
Yeah, destroy the ring, and that in turn would close the barrier. They would be trapped there, but they would save everybody else. And then they have kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, there's this classic thing of like, no one will know of our sacrifice type of thing.
Right. Yep.
Which is noble and all that. But
if they have the correct premises that, which Ashford is making a gamble on.
Worth a shot. And I believe part of the conversation that Drummer and Naomi have with Holden is the conversation around saying that in order to stop this from happening, all these ships need to power down as a show of peace, essentially, to say like, we're not trying to attack you, and that way of communicating. And I believe that was part of them getting that information from Holden specifically was
Yeah.
what Miller is telling him essentially. Does
Yep.
that sound correct?
Shut off all of the fusion drives so that there's no more, nuclear reactions happening. And that would show the station, the central place there, that it's everything's fine. We can chill down. We can de-escalate.
Yeah. And and this is just me asking another question if to make sure I'm remembering it correctly, was the behemoth the only one that was not willing to power down initially?
Yeah, well,
Because I know part of sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Anna started broadcasting with our documentary friends.
Yep.
To the what did they call it? Like they had a name for like their broadcast. I can't remember what it was,
Yeah,
but it's funny that they came up with that right away.
acronym.
Yeah, and then some of the ships started doing it, and then I kind of got others to convince to shut down. And I think at the end there, I think it was down to just the behemoth that was still had its fusion drive on.
I think that is correct because in my notes we have the whole situation of Holden, Drummer, and Naomi going to the reactor to try to shut it down. So I knew there was I do remember the conflict of Ashford not being willing to shut down the behemoth, but I couldn't remember if the other ships had started shutting down at that point. I think
at that point they had, because of the broadcast.
Right. So as you said there, we get this again. I think it's a pretty cool interaction. So we get them going down to the reactor. We have Anna there as well. We have the film crew there as well, and they are basically tasked with they're used. Now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm remembering how this last episode ends. So they're sending out the broadcast to try to convince the other ships to shut down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So apologize to anybody listening. We were working through that, remembering the exact details.
Getting the timeline right. Yep.
Yeah, making sure we get the timeline right. So yes, the purpose of the broadcast was to use Anna to convince the other ships to shut down. Her giving a reason, partly I think to distract them as well, as they're trying to shut down this reactor. And then of course we get the scene of the Martian Marines going down, Bobby being one of them, opening fire on them as they're doing this. And I remember being like, oh boy, this could be interesting, because I think they find out pretty quickly that Bobby and then I think Alex is one of them as well, have some interactions with that, and then them having this firefight and trying to have this conversation of like, you need to stop doing this, and like, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And of course ultimately I don't really remember the exact details, but I know the other few Marines get killed and then Bobby rejoins them.
Which is pretty crazy, like that's her, those are her people that are killed right there. And I get that she's spent some time with the Rocinante crew, but still that's, man, like her crew has, I don't know, that's a rough place for Bobby to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was interesting to me, speaking of Bobby's character, that she was like not defected, but that she went back to the Martian side and was kind of reaccepted after everything. It makes sense, but I was a little surprised that she went back.
Yeah, I think in the books that doesn't happen. I don't think she gets reinstated into the Martian Navy in the books after what happened. Right. So I think that was a show only choice, just to have Bobby in this part of the season.
Yeah. So looking at my notes, so of course we do get the scene where Anna's broadcast does convince the other ships to shut down. And that in the middle of that happening, Ashford sends out the order to have Holden and Naomi killed for attempting to shut down their ship. And we didn't speak of this, but we do get some more scenes of Melba, who I believe was imprisoned, but then she's brought up top to
all hands on deck.
She had her she had, well, I think she got to do it because she was like electrical background and experience, but then she ultimately assists them or powers down the ship. I remember she's pulling out takes out a dude, I think, if I remember correctly, and she's pulling out the cords and whatnot to power it all down to stop Ashford from doing what he's doing.
Little redemption for
Melba. A little bit of redemption. So I thought that was, I guess, good for her character in that regard. So we get the scene of course, all of the ships being powered down and ultimately getting released from the force field or whatever it is that it's called. So end of the tension there. And I'm kind of not speeding through this last part, but I really want to talk about the ending of the
Yeah, we got it.
episode, just
Talk
because
about
it's,
that.
I mean, it's very open ended, but
Yeah.
also really like kind of blew my mind in regards to um, what happens. So just to give a high level discussion on the end, we get the opening of all of the other portals. I think they said 1300.
Like 1300. Yeah.
Yeah, all of them leading to a new, I don't know if it's new, but all sending them to other galaxies.
Solar system
Solar
specifically.
system, yeah, galaxy
We don't
solar
know if they're
system.
all in the same
Yeah.
galaxy, but they're definitely solar systems.
Yeah, but we get this, of course, we get this very epic voiceover of Holden talking about humans being unable to help themselves in regards to exploring. And I feel like that's a theme we get a lot in a lot of other sci-fi shows as well. Like I think that's like even like a Star Trek thing as well, where it's just like the human race just can't help explore things. Like if we're presented with an unknown door, like we have to go through it. And
Yeah,
that's
have to
very
go through
much
it.
like even in shows where there's like alien races talking about, like alien races say that about humans. They're like, yeah, they just can't help themselves. Like humans just
Nope.
have to poke everything and do all this stuff. And I wanted to talk about this because knowing the way you think about things and the things that you like, I have to imagine you specifically being very excited about the potential of like where the show is going, because it ends very open ended. It's like, okay, we're all released, we're good now, but there's these 1300 portals that we could go through, and it ends. And I'm
And
thinking, yeah,
yeah, I was gutted. No, because you have to understand that at this point,
right,
the
yeah.
show had been canceled. So
Oh
when I saw this for the first time, I'm like, okay, that's the rest of the, well, I don't know. I think it was like within a few weeks there was like a little window where we were all convinced that it was not going to be renewed. Um, but yeah, when I saw him, like, crap, this was just getting good. Like things were just getting good, and they're not going to go forward with this. Like I get that sci-fi, maybe the budget for what's about to happen next, they don't have, but I was so sad. But when it got picked up by Amazon again, then you start getting excited again because you're like,
yeah.
okay, the possibilities are here. Amazon has that Jeff Bezos money, so
He's
they
doing
can throw
something
it,
good with it, I guess.
so they can throw a little bit more at the budget. Because if you're having, I mean, so what are you thinking before I get into
Yeah.
anything here? So I think it's fair to assume that we're probably going to see what's on the other side of these gates, right? Is that kind of what you're thinking here?
Yeah. Well, for me, I liked the ending, just the possibility, because it could literally go in any direction at this point. So that's exciting to see what they choose to do. But at the same time, I was also wondering, like, is it going to be just like in my head? I'm like, okay, are they literally just going to go through one of them and that's going to be the direction? Or like, are we going to like, for me, it's like, there's no way we could possibly explore all of them in regards to like 1300 of these open. There's no way we're going to be able to figure this all out. So in my head, I'm like, either it's going to be like a collective trying to figure out where these go, or they're just going to like pick a circle and go through it.
Right.
And that's what they're going to do. So that's where I was at with it. As soon as that happened, I was like, man, this could go so many directions, because I'm not sure if they're going to focus on just one thing, if there's going to be something that they do a scan and one of them has like a little blip of something and they decide to go through that one, or if it's all of them share a common theme, or if they all lead to a similar spot, or if they're all random. So my head was just racing, because I know that there's just endless possibilities of which they could go. But yeah, a lot of excitement. But I haven't started the fourth season as of this recording, because I wanted my brain to be fresh for this discussion as much as it could be, just because there's a lot going on. And even then, we had to talk through the timeline and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective, just knowing like as you're watching this going, yeah, we're never going to know, probably.
It would
That
have
has
been,
to be a very depressing, like in my head, I'm
yeah.
like, of course I have the excitement of like, oh, there's a season 4 and 5, and of course they're making final season
Season
6 right
6,
now.
yeah.
So I have that excitement, but I have to imagine, and maybe once I get through the show, I'll go back on like Reddit and find these old threads of seeing these discussions. But I have to imagine just people being so mad of being enticed by this like huge possibility of being able to explore these new gates, and then thinking that that's never going to happen. Like,
Yeah. But I will say I'm pretty sure at this point in production. So when Sci-Fi was producing season 3 here, I think they knew it was being canceled. So
Oh,
it's a
gotcha. So
fine way of wrapping things up.
yeah.
Kind of open ended. All the current plot lines are closed right now. There's no real open plot threads to return to. So that was all good. And then leaving the possibility of it being picked up by either another distributor, maybe by Sci-Fi later in the future. So it was a good ending. Even like if you look at this as being just the ending of the show and that's what it was, like that's not a terrible ending. Like wanting more and like having like this blank slate for your imagination to fill in like what might have happened, like that's not terrible, even though of course there's the books. But I thought all things considered, with Sci-Fi knowing it was being canceled, that was probably the best way you could have concluded the show. But of course I'm very thrilled, very happy that it did get picked up, and that we can obviously continue talking about it for season
Yeah.
4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. I think given the context that you gave it, it makes sense that this is the type of ending it would have in terms of leaving it open ended. Because if they never did pick up the show, you could, you'd be sad seeing that that's how it ends, but there's not like some super crazy cliffhanger that you're like, well,
Right.
did this person die? Or are they alive? Well, I guess we're never going to find out because the show.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Nothing
then of
like that,
course,
at
if it gets
least.
picked up, the writers have a fairly clean slate to move forward with in terms
Mhm.
of how they're going to go. Granted, I say clean slate. I assume they, continue to follow the books somewhat going
Yeah.
forward. So it's not a complete clean slate, but in terms of, having the open endness of, these portals are open and humans
Mhm.
are going to do what they do, and
Yeah,
that's
it's a
that.
good way
So
of getting the audience on board. So even, for people who have I kind of think that actually that for people who haven't seen episodes seasons 1 through 3, like I feel like people could start at season 4 and still really enjoy the show, but um
yeah,
1 through 3, books 1 through 3 are kind of like its own trilogy, kind of complete by itself. And then you have book 4, which is starting a very new uh, section, character and story arc for the show. Like it very much feels like a separate thing. So it kind of works out that Amazon picked it up when it did.
and maybe that ending was what convinced Jeff Bezos to pick it up. I got to know what happens
I gotta
next,
know.
and then I'm gonna go there myself.
I'm gonna put on my cowboy hat and I'm gonna strap into my penis shaped object and ride into
Yeah,
space. And
that was what convinced him to buy.
yep,
Yeah, but to buy the rights and then go to space. Maybe this was the show. We
yep.
can blame the Expanse
Yeah,
for.
no, I'm sure. Just as a little little non sequitur, like I'm sure he was viewing any IP that he can add to Amazon that promotes space travel as just this thing in popular consciousness is probably the best investment to make right
Yeah,
now. I'm sure that's how he was viewing it. Who knows if he actually likes the show beyond that? But
yeah.
for us,
I think he probably does, but it also puts him in
I
a
hope
great
so.
light for anybody who loves the show is going to be a huge fan of Jeff Bezos in terms of like
Right?
picking up the show that they love. So
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
that played into it as well. Like, oh, this will paint me I'm saving this cult show that people are following and stuff. Blah
yeah,
blah blah. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
we digress on that conversation, but just obviously talking about the context of what was going on in the world around the show, and not, is it going to get picked up and is it not going to picked up? But we live in a world where there's a final season happening. I believe season 6 is the
Absolutely.
final season, correct? So
Yep. And then there are other books after that, 7, 8, and
yeah,
9, which will not be covered by the show, but that's okay. That's complete spoilers way ahead. When we get to the end of season 6, we can talk about why that decision
sure.
was probably made.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So we can wrap up here, and I will say that this episode 7 through this finale so far is hands down my favorite part of the show so far. Just so much happened, so much great character development. Again, people like Ashford love his character, so interested to see if we see more of him. But just loved everything that happened for the most part. It all worked out really well in terms of the intertwining plots that are happening at the same time. I thought it ended very well, and just left me wanting more, which is what all you can ask for from a show, because a lot of shows can slowly die off as they go on in terms of just the interest you have. So I really, really enjoyed this. And I think you implied that that was probably how I was going to feel about it, just that it continues to get better and better. So really loved this part of the season. And I kind of treat it as its own season almost, just because the first half and this half are just so different. And there's that very obvious book split right there. So absolutely loved this area. And I'm super excited to get into season 4. But how do you feel about this section of the show? Is it
Yeah, I really
as good
like,
as you remember?
yeah, I like Abaddon's Gate quite a lot. It's definitely top half of the books for me. So really good book, really good adaptation. Great choices were made in terms of adapting that to the show in within 6 episodes that we had here, however many it was.
Mhm.
Worked really well, streamlined that story. I'm quite happy with this part of the season. I really loved it. My opinion though, yeah, season 4 is better. So I'm really excited to
Wow.
talk to you
Okay.
about season 4.
Yeah, I think you've basically said that. I don't think that's really a spoiler to say that
Yeah.
the show keeps getting better, but
Yeah.
that's
There might
exciting just
be
because it was super strong. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
season 4 is a little divisive, just because the book is a little divisive.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I cannot wait to get into season 4. So that'll be of course the next episode. I'm guessing broken into 2 parts just because these seasons are so dense with a lot of stuff that we end up talking about it for a long time like this. So for anybody who's still watching, thank you so much. These episodes are long, so I'm still amazed to get comments and messages from people saying that they enjoyed the conversations and that you've even watched the whole thing. So thank you guys for that. So feel free to subscribe if you're interested in watching these episodes and seeing future episodes as well. So I'll link the part 1 of this season down below, as well as above, probably at the beginning of this episode. So definitely feel free to do that. Go check out Josh's channel. It's been a bit dormant for a little while at Comic Q, but I know you have some stuff coming down the line. So
Correct.
go
Yep.
check him out as well if you're interested, seeing his past videos as well as future videos as well. So again, thank you so much for watching, and feel free to leave us a message below on how you feel about the season, because we'll gladly have some back and forth down in the comments if you would like to do that as well.
And we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, thank you again.